Interest rates on subsidized Stafford loans, they doubled from 3.4% Monday to 6.8% and could stay doubled unless Congress fulfills its pledge to restore lower rates when it comes back from the 4th of July holiday. Now, efforts to keep interest rates from doubling on new loans, they fell apart last week among partisan sniping in the Senate. Sound familiar? Well, if a deal still can't be struck, the cost passed on to students would be about $2,500, the amount of a total student loan debt. It has soared in the past decade, shooting from $240 billion at the start of 2003 to nearly $1 trillion today. And the consequences, I mean, I don't have to educate many of you people at home, but it's not just in how you're paying for it, but what happens in the year, the decade, and the decades after. It makes choices for both young people and even for their families in the years and decades to come. And for more on this, we're very pleased to be joined by Dennis Cariello. He's an education lawyer and one of the practice group leaders in the education group of DLA Piper. He also served as Deputy General Counsel for Post-Secondary Education and Regulatory Services at the Department of Ed in both the Bush and Obama administrations. Oh, that was pretty good. And we also are joined here by Kevin Stump, higher education advocate at the New York Public Interest Research Group, NYPIRG. Gentlemen, thank you very much for a few minutes.
Thank you.
Let's do the Schoolhouse Rock. How did we go basically almost quintupling the size of outstanding loans here for college, and how did the cost of college go from, you know, $10,000 at some college? I was talking to somebody yesterday that it's now costing $40,000 at the same school. How did things just escalate on steroids so fast?
Well, I think it's a complicated question. I mean, you have the availability of federal aid. Some might say that that has contributed. You have students that their demands have moved beyond the education, just the pure education. And so when you talk to administrators, amenities are actually one of the #1 things that students look at in terms of choosing a college. And then you have federal and other regulations have caused colleges to have to add more administrators, thus increasing cost. And I want to leave administrators out here as completely blameless, because I think that there has not been enough done in terms of controlling costs at the university. So all of these factors combined, I think, has yielded the system we have, which is a very costly education in some quarters and record levels of student debt.
And the consequences to that, if you ask the person at home, what's a greater outstanding liability, credit card debt or student loan debt? Student loan debt tops credit cards here, and we're seeing it's now hit $1 trillion. We have to forecast this. The number's obviously only going to get bigger and bigger at an accelerated rate, right?
That's right. And not only will the number get bigger, but because of some changes enacted by the president, the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, is primarily the sole lender here. There is some private lending going on, but it's not a huge volume. So the Department of Education is the primary lender for all students, and as a result, it's the taxpayers that is on the hook for all of this.
Kevin, put this in human terms for the kids here, because when we were talking about the subject and we were looking into it, we figured, okay, well, maybe it'll impact their first job, but it's more than that. Especially now, since '08 here, people look, credit ratings a lot closer here, and what they have in terms of those outstanding liabilities. It's going to be harder to get a house. It's going to be harder even for when they want to choose to get married, but then to start a family, because you got to make the number. You got to pay the nut here, and it just keeps going up and up.
Sure.
Put a human face in this if you could.
So there's a couple things here. You know, you asked the question, why is student loan debt $1 trillion now, and how is that going to impact the average American? Student loan debt has gone up so quickly because tuition has skyrocketed, because states have cut aid to public colleges, endowments have been cut, decreasing the amount of monies that private colleges and public colleges can give out to students. And we've seen, you know, anytime there's an economic dip, we see a surge in college enrollment, especially today as we move to a knowledge-based economy. President Obama, the College Board, the Lumina Foundation, the Governors Association, you name it, every prominent leader is calling for an increased amount of Americans with a college degree. So all of these factors, increased tuition, decreased investment, a surge in enrollment, and this new call to action to have more Americans with a college degree have really compounded and pushed student loan debt through the roof. And so this is really going to, and you know, we were talking earlier this afternoon about, you know, is the 3.4% interest rate that has just doubled, right, yesterday to 6.8%, is that really going to be the be-all, end-all? Is this the biggest crisis that we're faced with student loan debt? No. The reality is that, you know, A, this only talks about one type of student loan debts. B, it doesn't address the inadequate federal financial aid programs like the federal Pell Grant program. C, it doesn't talk about incentivizing colleges and universities in states to create mechanisms that keep tuition down so we don't have students that need to continue to borrow and borrow. So, I mean, there's a number of different solutions that we need to talk about here.
But one of them, which I don't like as a solution, but guys, Mayor Bloomberg, think about what he said about this issue. He said, you know what? Frankly, the value of a college degree, maybe it's better for a lot of folks to become a plumber. And this is in no way as a shot at somebody making a plumber. Anybody who's got a house here knows what you got to pay in the hourly numbers
when you
there.
have $30 billion, that's an easy thing to say. There's a ridiculousness to that. Not because people shouldn't become, you're welcome. You shouldn't become plumbers, that's a fine thing. You shouldn't become a plumber because you can't afford to go to school. That's the point.
That's absolutely right.
You know, Mayor Bloomberg is in touch with some things and out of touch with a lot of things.
You don't close the door after you've walked through the door of opportunity, and now the rest of us can't come through. It's just not right.
Some useful numbers. Last month, or actually May, the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce looked at the issue of unemployment among graduates with a BA and those who have not attended college. If you had a BA, you had a 7.9% unemployment rate, which is still higher than average, and it does differ based on what you took when you were in school. But still, the odds are you were going to be employed consistent with the rest of the economy. If you did not go to college, if you just had merely a high school diploma, your unemployment rate is about 15%. I mean, so there's a real economic benefit, putting aside the arguments that we've all heard about.
But it has changed things in terms of, my kids go to college. Not yet, but when they do. If they say, Dad, I want to major in philosophy or language arts or something else, a generation ago, that still could open up doors for you. You got an English degree at certain colleges. I remember that was an entree if you wanted to do journalism, you wanted to go into publishing, whatever it was. Now there's a drive, consciously or otherwise. You got to get into a practical degree. You got to get a business degree. You got to go whatever else. And then the expectation is you got to get a master's right now. That wasn't an assumption before. That's almost part of the mathematical equation right now, where it's almost a non-starter. You can't get certain jobs unless you have a professional degree attached to it. And that only exacerbates, I guess, the money issues, right?
Yeah, I think that would be fair to say. And we can see this new push from the top down, really, from President Obama and even in New York State, Governor Cuomo are really calling to push students and to really push our university systems into the fields of discipline that will create jobs where, you know, the Department of Labor has identified that there's a need for it. And I mean, we see that here in New York with things like New York SUNY 2020 or, you know, different proposals from Governor Cuomo that suggest we should be really putting all of our money into industry-focused programs that will graduate students to get those jobs.
It's a recipe for cultural and educational disaster. The colleges as farm teams for business, not that there's anything wrong with going into business, but if the purpose of education becomes purely employment, you're going to see a decline in the quality of our economic, cultural, and social health.
Toward that end, what's the potential impact for the overall society? Is this, I mean, we talk a little bit about economic mobility, being able to move up from lower class to middle class or middle class to upper class. Does this retard that process even more by excluding more kids out of?
Yes. I mean, this has really become a matter of educational access and educational affordability. Even though this particular crisis that we're here talking about, the July 1st, again, doubling 3.4 to 6.8%, would only affect the average borrower something like $40 a month or something like that. And that may not sound like a whole lot, but what it does is fuels the conversation of whether or not students can actually get an affordable higher education. And so people feel like they don't have access to affordable higher education. And then where does this slippery slope end? you know, okay, it doubles to 6.8%. A lot of these proposals on the table will bring the rate eventually right back up to 6.8%.
There's a point,
where
I
does
think
it
we've
end?
hit it already, where you say, is it worth spending 50 grand a year at a college? And I'm not talking an Ivy right now. And then you know that even if you walk out with a degree, you still got to get a master's somewhere. You can see the math going on in people's minds. Even if the kid's a high achiever, maybe it's worth it going to community college for a couple of years and then try to get, I mean, this is the math question, which you're right, shouldn't have to take place, but it is right now. And I saw one last number which blew me away. There are colleges right now in America where you are less likely to graduate than default because of debt. And if we don't think it's a wake-up call, forget about the headline this past week of typical DC in action. That should be it. But guys, thank you very much. Dan,
Pleasure.
Kevin, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we will turn back the clock. We're going to take you to Gettysburg, where this week marks 150 years since a battle that changed American history. Stay with us.